talk to you around developing person-centred outcomes. If you follow us on Facebook, did anybody see my post early this morning about outcomes? I know a couple of people did, because people went, oh, I'm glad you don't know what Periscope is as well. Oh no, Charlotte, you were supposed to. But one of the last 12 years, really, working around care and support planning in lots of different areas, both in social care and health. And I think probably the first thing we tried to do was to help people see that we needed to take a really person-centred approach to that. And I think we really got that message across in the early work around personal budgets, and again in the early work around personal health budgets. The bit that I don't think we did very well was to help people develop really person-centred outcomes. And that's something I've been kind of wrestling with for the last 5 years, really, and thinking, how do we make that happen? How do we make them really relevant to people when we're planning with people and helping them, when we're in a review situation and we're working on those outcomes, when we're in those transfer reviews and meetings for those of you that are SENCOs or in school situations. How do we make outcomes really relevant to children, young people, their families, and any of the adults that we're working with in whatever setting? So I'm not particularly talking about certain groups of people. I'm trying to take a really broad approach to outcomes here. I guess what I was saying in my post this morning was, they're just plain hard outcomes. Who else finds them really difficult to write outcomes that they feel are really, working with and engaging people? Yeah, good. So you're not owning much. Come on, hands up. Thank you, that's better. So I think they are really plain hard. I think it's very easy for us to write them that they're not specific enough, and our service language comes in. I've been working in services 30 years, so it's a really hard language, it's a really hard habit to break. I'm trying to get my daughter a personal budget at the moment, and I'm already working on the outcomes. I haven't got an allocated social worker yet, but I'm working on the outcomes, and I heard myself say, for her to be able to access education, I thought, why do I not just say, get to school, get to school? So it's really, really challenging. So what we want to do in this, or what I want to do in this next hour, is I want to talk for a little bit, hopefully not too much time, and just share some thoughts firstly, and then I want to share 2 tools that I use to actually help me. I'm not saying you have to use them, I'm just going to share these are the tools that I've been using, and then I'm going to get you to have a go. Okay, and so I don't have to talk for a whole hour, you have to do a little bit of work. And you're going to do that on your tables, okay? And we're going to have a go at writing some person-centred outcomes. And that's the bit I think that's really important. Even though I do a lot of work in health and I lead on things like personal health budgets in our team, I've actually done quite a lot of work in SEND in the last 18 months, and I got sent a list of good outcomes, I think it was described as, an example list. My favourite being, X will maintain his or her full potential for oral intake. I'm sorry, I still don't know what it means. And I've worked in services 30 years. So with that in mind, these are just some of the things, the thoughts I've got really about outcomes. So I think we are really good at measuring success. So whatever field you work in, there will be some kind of tick box or form or inspection criteria that you are working to, and you work really, really hard at doing that. We count lots of things. We count plans. So in the SEND work, you'll be counting the numbers of transfers or new EHC, Education, Health and Care plans. In health, we're counting, so if we're looking at personal budgets or personal health budgets, we will be counting the amount of people who have a personal health budget in this country. What we don't know is if that counting and that kind of measurement is just about ticking a box, because I bet a lot of it is. And what we're not doing is actually looking at whether the services we provide in whatever situation that is are actually making a difference in somebody's life. If they are improving their lives so they get this lovely Mary Poppins practically perfect life. And that's actually what we need to do. And the easiest way to measure whether what we do is really helping is to look at outcomes. That's the place where you can actually see the real difference to people who are using services, whatever those services might be. So outcomes become really important as a measurement tool and a quality tool when you begin to look at that really. So, we used to talk about 2 common mistakes, but actually Charlotte and I have been talking, we have 3 now. So if you've heard some of this before, sorry, we now got 3. So the 3 common mistakes, this is just our opinion and you honestly can share more, but I think the things that we do most commonly, the mistakes we make most commonly. Firstly is we embed the solution. How many times have you seen an outcome that says, my outcome is to have 5 hours of speech and language therapy, physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, it could be any therapy, or for this service, or for this product, or anything like that. That's not the outcome, that's the solution wrapped up as an outcome. And later on I want to share a tool around breaking that apart really and understanding really what the outcome is. So that's mistake number 1, we embed solutions. Mistake number 2 is that we're just not specific enough. Okay, so I've seen, maintaining full potential for oral intake. So, I've got to keep going that time. So, what is full potential? That's not specific enough. I have no idea what that means. The oral intake, why can't we just say food or drink or whatever it might be? But maintaining full potential, we tend to use words like that. So, favourites would be, and I kind of thought about this for my daughter and thinking, to access community facilities on a regular basis. Again, what does that mean? So, what community facility? Why can't I just say go to? What community facilities and what does regular mean? You know, we're not being specific enough. And I remember having this talk, but 4 or 5 years ago to a group of social workers, and a social worker said, "So that outcome I wrote yesterday to be more independent just doesn't cut it, does it?" And I said, no. That's what we're talking about. We're just not specific enough. Because if we're not specific, we can't measure. And then we can't work out if we're reaching Mary Poppins and our practically perfect world. Sorry, couldn't get that. And then the third one, and this is our new one, is that we don't link outcomes to what matters to people. So we were just having a conversation. Who was I talking to on the table that was just, thank you, Gail, who was just talking about 3 days of planning with somebody, somebody who absolutely adored horses, and it was all about riding horses, and right in the last day somebody said, "What about a train ride?" Okay, what about thank you for that one, Gail, that was a great example. Charlotte told me a similar experience about somebody wanted to do drama, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, we loved drama, loved singing, loved dancing, really enjoyed all that sort of stuff. The most fabulous section A in an EHC plan imaginable about all this sort of thing, and she ended up being put on an animal care course.
Okay, so linking it to what matters to the person, really important if we're going to make it person-centred. We've also got to link it to the things that people need help with. That's really, really important. And that bit we can sometimes do really well. It's that eligible need, isn't it? But actually linking it to what matters is something we've not been great at. So what makes a good person-centred outcome? What are some of the things that we're looking at? So we're looking at something that is personal. It's not expressed from a service perspective. Maintaining full potential for oral intake is a service perspective. Okay? Being able to eat my favourite food and describing what that food is starts to make it more personal, really. So it's beginning to explore some of that. It's about writing outcomes that either the person, young person, or their family, or those supporting them, actually have some control over. Because otherwise we're setting people up, surely. So if you're thinking about something that is not within anybody's control to resolve, actually, why would that become an outcome? That we're setting up failure straight away. So thinking about influence and control and making it measurable and specific. Okay, so those are things I think would make a really good person-centred outcome. Because I mentioned the word solution and embedded solutions, I just want to define what I'm meaning by a solution. So a solution is the resource that you need to achieve your activity. It can be an item, to achieve your outcome. It can be an item or an activity, and it might have a cost associated with it, but it could be free. I recently planned with a lady who has rheumatoid arthritis, and we were writing some outcomes, and her outcome was about going to the theatre with her friend every month and being able to safely get out of a chair, and that was her main concern. She couldn't safely get out of a chair. And you know what? We thought about going and get some equipment. My silly idea in our blue sky thinking was a Zebedee spring to buoying her out of the chair. But actually what we came up with, she was, even despite having very, very severe rheumatoid arthritis, she was a brilliant dressmaker, had been for many, many years. She made us up a cushion, okay? A little cushion, bit of Cath Kidston material, went away, made that herself. It cost nothing. It changed her life. She wrote an email to me and said, this changed my life. You changed my life, the conversation we had about that. And it was a simple thing, didn't have to cost. So it's not always about things that cost. It's not always about provision in some way. That makes sense? Still with me? Yeah. Fab. Okay, so in your pack, guys, you've got one of these. Okay, in your bag, sorry, in your bag. It's not a pack, is it? It's a bag. Beautiful bag as well. You don't need to get it out. You don't have to get it out. I'm going to talk through it, but I just wanted you to know you had one. Giant one up here as well. So we just started, I guess our thinking around outcomes was in lots of different areas. And we really like a graphic in HSA, and we like it as a way to be able to explain things. So we developed this 8-step process. Now, I don't want you to think that means it is very complicated, because it's not, I promise you. Most of this is about a 10-minute conversation with people. It's not something you have to labour through, but what we're saying is you do need to have thought about these things to be writing really good person-centred outcomes, in our opinion. Okay? So I'm going to, don't try and read all of that now, but I'm going to work through each step very quickly, talking to you now. So, I don't think you can write outcomes if you don't know what matters to people first, because then we make that mistake, don't we? So one of the first things that we need to do is to make sure we've had those conversations about what matters. So if you think about a review process, the person-centred review process, we know that the process enables you to have that conversation. So you're gathering information about what's important to people, you're gathering information about how best to support them, and you then go on and talk about aspirations as well. So if you know those two things, you have a much better chance of developing a person-centred outcome, because you have the context within which to do that. That makes sense? So that's your first step, and as I said, you can do that quite simply through something like the one-page profile. Obviously you're collecting that in the review process, but also just using really simple things like if I could, I would. Another one might be perfect week, as a way of understanding aspirations. We're really frightened about aspirations as well, aren't we? And those of you working with children and young people, there's a much bigger drive around aspirations than there's ever been before, and that aspirations should be leading any of the work that we're doing with children and young people, in particular. But it's really, really important. So just to plant the seed, I'm going to be asking you to each think of something, an aspiration you personally have, asking the if I could, I would question. So that's going to be your first task when I get you to do some work. So I thought I'd plant the seed now. Okay, so once you've got that information, then we need to really focus on what's happening now. Because again, if we want to engage with children, young people and adults around their outcomes, then they need to be about things that are not working in their life, or things that are working but need a little bit of extra help to carry on. So they need to be connected to those things. And the best way I know to have an understanding of what's going on in somebody's life right now is to do a working, not working tool. Okay? We've got a couple of versions of this that we've been using within education at the moment. So one of the, so Jill showed you the PFA, the Preparing for Adulthood. And so there's 4 areas that Preparing for Adulthood talks about. Talks about learning skills, moving towards employment. If you're working with 3-year-olds, maybe language development, not employment. It's illegal in this country at the moment. Home and independence, health and well-being, friends, relationships and community. And you would use the same techniques that you guys know, which is you do it from different perspectives. So children, young person, families, social, school and any others that are involved. So that was just a format we've been using. Department of Education, have a little bit of thinking, I'm just wondering where this is going, yeah. Not changing some of their ideas around this, so actually starting talking to more familiar headings that we've talked about: communication and interaction, cognition and learning, social, emotional, mental health, sensory and physical. It doesn't matter what prompts you use to gather the information. And if you're not working in education, children, young people services, working, not working, doing it from different perspectives. So I just wanted to share a flavour of those kind of tools. But for me, I always ask this question to identify what the issues are that maybe the person wants to work through. That make sense? It's then about prioritising those and thinking about where you might start with those outcomes. Often people have a number of issues, so it's actually co-producing those priorities. So all the legislation, it doesn't matter what legislation you're talking about, it doesn't matter if you're talking about SEND, doesn't matter if you're talking Care Act, 5-year forward view, Welsh, or the Welsh legislation, any of it is very clearly saying it's about equal partnership, it's about recognising the person as an expert around their own lives, it's about co-producing things, and that's really important when it comes to priorities. Because I think one of the things that we've often done as practitioners is we're imposing our priorities. We're saying this is what we think needs to change in your life. We're not always listening to that really well. So prioritising is really important. So where do you start with those issues? Okay, and so there's a couple of places where I pull those issues from, and it depends what group you're working with really. So when I'm doing a review with adults, for example, I will have done my mingle, and you've got a lot of information up. And so what I would probably look to do is to look straight to the working, not working, having checked that that really reflects what's important to somebody and how to support them. And then I would pick the themes from that working, not working, and agree those as a set of issues that we then want to develop outcomes from. If you're working in children's services, there's a much stronger drive around aspirations. I mentioned that a while ago. And actually, what I've been talking to people about doing and actually doing in reviews is starting with aspirations. So linking the first outcome you might work on as a group of people in a review, in a transfer meeting, is one that's linked directly to an aspiration. So if you got on your heading in your review meeting, what aspirations do you have for the future? I would then ask that young person or that family to say, okay, what one outcome could we set to move towards that aspiration? So there's different places to start with this, but whatever you're doing, so you're picking either from aspirations and then working, not working, or you're diving straight into working, not working, and maybe then going back to aspirations. No hard and fast rules, but what you do need to do is prioritise. We go back to our faithful friends, the multi-dot vote. Who knows about multi-dot voting? Good. Okay. I'm not going to explain the rules of multi-dot voting today, but there's somebody in the room that you can ask about multi-dot voting. But it's if you're planning with a group of people, and that's what we're talking about in a person-centred review, aren't we? Multi-dot voting is a quick way to get to those priorities. It's not about saying that you're not tackling all the issues, it's just saying we're going to work on the ones that are most important to you first. Okay, so really important to do that prioritising. Still with me? Okay. I don't think my voice is. Just for a minute. Emily, what have you given me? Okay, so next thing. So you've got priorities. So let's say we're taking our priority number one. It's an issue, whatever it might be. First question I ask people when I'm doing this, and this is a really quick and easy thing. This is not about creating a beautiful sentence. It's just saying, if we really got this right, if we tackled this thing, if we moved you towards the future you want around this issue, what would success look like? What are we talking about? So it's getting that personal element straight away. I'm thinking, you know, some of the times in schools we might be thinking, as a teacher, you might be thinking about a level of reading you want somebody to get to, whereas a child might be thinking, I'd like to read the football magazine that all my mates read. So you're trying to get to that. That's what you're looking for. You're beginning to pull on that personal element. Make sense? Okay, so don't agonise over that. It's just a quick step. But then it's actually about moving on to developing the outcome. So that's our step 5. Okay, 2 tools that I want to share with you that I particularly use. And you can use either, you can use both, and I'll kind of explore those as well. I'm going to get you to have a go, at least at the first one I'm going to show you. So, I take my issue, And the first tool I use, I go back to my faithful important to and important for. And this one works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but this is one that I really like to do. So this is the issue you've just agreed. And then what you're doing, and I'm going to share some examples, is just about that issue. You're asking the person, what's important to you about that issue? And here, it says healthy and safe, but I think you could add the words fulfilling potential, making progress, particularly when you're working with children and young people. They're words that I add into that when I'm doing that. And then what you do, I always say this is like a math song for me, okay? This is the working out. This is the only bit that you see at the end of it, okay? And you pull those two together to try and write something that reflects a bit of a balance. So, just give you some examples. So I'm going to do 3 different examples. One that I feel is a bit of a kind of social care example, one that's a bit of a education, and one that's a bit of a health, okay? So, this is for a young woman who loves to do gymnastics, and, well, it says here, to go to her gymnastics, dancing and swimming each week. The issue that we identified, or was identified through the Working Not Working, is that her mum and dad come with her. And she's a bit old for her mum and dad to come with her, and it's a bit embarrassing because actually she doesn't want her mum and dad to come with her anymore. So, thinking about what was important to her is that she goes to those classes and that she goes without mum and dad. However, she's got some heart problems, she's got some leg and hip problems. She needs people with her who know how to support her with those issues. So she needs some, and at the moment, that's only mum and dad. So her outcome is to be supported by somebody other than my mum and dad. A little bit of a solution in there, but we haven't said who yet, so we've not embedded our solution. To attend my gymnastics, dancing and swimming lessons each week. If I was really picky, I could have said when they were, but I don't think you have to be that specific. Another example, okay, it was a teacher who wrote this one. I'm looking at the teachers in the room. I did. So this was to improve my reading. Not very specific, is it? We don't know what's going on. So for this child, this is a 7-year-old child who has quite severe dyslexia actually, and some kind of self-esteem issues as well. So he doesn't want to be different from the others in his class, which he currently is because of his reading level, and he wants to be able to read his favourite book or his football magazine. Okay, can you see the personal element coming in? What's important for him? This is not to stay healthy, this is to make progress, is to reach a level of fluency in my reading, to reach age expectation in reading, and to be able to access, see that lovely word in there, all areas of learning. So the outcome we put down was to improve my level of reading so I can read on my own, like the others in my class. This will mean I can read my favourite book or football magazine, and it will also help me with my other class activities. So I managed to avoid the word access then when I wrote it. When you're writing outcomes within the SEND process, we are looking at outcomes over a time frame of possibly key stage. It's quite loose at the moment around that. When I'm writing outcomes for somebody within a care and support plan, I'm usually looking at a year. We're thinking about a year. So that feels really big, but actually when you think about a key stage, that's not actually that big. Okay? Just a health example, and then I will stop with these examples. So this is a woman called Heather, who she has lupus and a range of other long-term conditions, particularly affecting her chest and has quite complex issues around chest infections. And she's on additional oxygen at really high level. And she has that delivered through an oxygen concentrator, which is a massive thing, looks like an air conditioning unit and plugs into the mains. So when we did the Working Not Working, she said, I can't go out of the house when I'm well. So what's important to her is to be able to spend time with her friends when she's well each week, and go out. She's not well every week either. So what's important for her, she's got a really mean consultant who says she's got to maintain oxygen sats at above 96%, which I think is really hard for somebody on that level of oxygen, but that was what was being said. So the outcome is a combination of those two. When I'm well, to go out and spend time with my friends twice a week and maintain my oxygen saturation above 96% when I'm out. Really simple. Could have added a little bit more detail. It's usually Hobbycraft and Costa Coffee she wants to go to. But you don't necessarily need that level of detail because she might change her mind, mightn't she? It's the getting out twice a week to meet her friends. So you can see the personal bit and you can see the maintaining her kind of oxygen sats, which is the keeping her healthy and safe. Am I making any sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's tool number 1. Tool number 2 is these 3 questions. I'm going to flash up another slide to make it easier to see. So these 3 questions come from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP for short, much easier to say. And that's one of the pillars of NLP is that you start with the end in mind, okay? So you're thinking about that outcome. And in NLP terms, it's described as the well-formed outcome. And there are 14 questions that you can ask somebody to define this well-formed outcome. I thought that might make people's heads pop, so 3 is what we went for. I use this tool in 2 ways. Firstly, I use it when you're in a review situation and somebody is saying, I want my child to have this provision or this therapy, or somebody comes with a very clear, I want a personal assistant. And that's not the outcome. The personal assistant, the therapy, the provision is the solution. So what you need to do is find out what's underneath that. What outcomes is that going to help somebody achieve? So you ask these questions. What would it give you? What would it do for you? What would it make possible for you? And you keep asking them until you get to the real crux of the issue. That turns into your outcome. So to show you some examples. To have a taxi for college. That's a classic one for anybody who's in schools and colleges, isn't it? Or you could alternatively have a car. I've seen that one as well. So what would that give you? It would give you transport to college. What would it do for you? I can learn things about being independent. What would it make possible for you? I can get a job when I leave, be able to travel. You can have any answer to that. It's going to be very, very personal. But actually, once you've kind of got some of those answers, what you might guess, because what was being said there was to be about independent, get to college. Doesn't have to be via taxi, does it? And in fact, independent taxi is not that independent. So the actual outcome turns out to be to take the bus to college independently, have a mobile phone so I can use it to let people know where I am. And that tackled some of those issues. Another one, 5 hours of speech and language therapy. I work with some parents who were writing their own children's support plan in the Children's Individual Budget Pilot. And she said 5 hours of speech and language therapy a week. So there was a little bit of a conversation about that. But even so, that's not the outcome, is it? That's an embedded solution. So we talked about, okay, if you had that, what would it give you? It'd give you time with a speech therapist. What would it do for you? Help me be more easily understood. Now we're getting to the issue, by friends in particular. Make possible for you. Friendship, social activities, feeling confident. What was happening for this little girl was that nobody would play with her, particularly in the after-school club, because they couldn't understand her communication. And then she got really angry. And then she would perhaps just hit somebody. So then she's got a lovely label of being challenging. So actually the outcome for her is that she's understood by her friends and can play with them in the after-school club. We've got some solutions in just a minute around some of these. Does that make sense? Okay. So once you've done that, and you've nailed down that lovely, beautifully wordsmithed outcome, then it's saying, okay, well, why is that not happening? What's getting in the way? So you might have picked some of that up through the working, not working, but maybe not everything, because now you've more closely defined your outcome. It's about saying, what's stopping this very outcome from happening? And you're just asking that question because outcomes tend to have obstacles in the way. You need to identify the obstacles so you can then plan the actions and the steps that begin to, tackle some of those issues. Okay, so you're asking that what's in the way of this outcome actually happening now, and then you're asking that question. You're actually getting on to creating some action around that. So, I was surprised. Our group came up with Mr. Blue Sky, didn't we, as a theme tune, and we didn't pick it in the end. But bit of blue sky thinking. This is what I would tend to do, even in that review situation. You're trying to come up with solutions. But I tend to give it a bit of a twist these days. So the usual rules of blue sky thinking, no idea is a silly idea, hence my Zebedee Spring when I was planning with Janet. You get every idea down on paper until they dry up, and then you go back through and you think which one's going to be relevant. But I like to do a radical, traditional and different twist on a bit of blue sky thinking. So I'll go back, radical, trying to help people see what we mean. Heston's a bit of a radical chef, wouldn't you say? Delia. Does everybody know who Delia is? Somebody didn't know who Delia was. I felt so old. Delia's my traditional go-to. I get my how-to cookbook out when I need to know stuff, and Jamie, I think, sits between those two. So what I'm saying is, when you're trying to think of solutions, when you're trying to fix this situation, you've got your outcome, stretch yourselves. Don't just think of the very obvious traditional provision and services that you know. Go radical. Even if it's a bit silly, it might bring you back to something that's really useful to have explored. And once you've done all of that, I just wanted to give you some solutions. So Charlotte's worked out some lovely solutions for some of these issues. So we thought about travel buddies and friends or neighbours travelling, practice using the phone in different situations, a course. You know, there's lots of different things that you can think about. Speech and language therapy being one in this one, help in the classroom including my friends, social activities outside of school, differentiated curriculum, and my friends learn my signs. So lots of different solutions, some of them quite traditional. That's not to say traditional's wrong, but also some of them a little bit more radical. I've heard some very, very funny radicals on training courses, actually. Maybe I shouldn't mention them. Okay, and then the last thing you do, it says EHC there, but actually there's any plan that you're doing would be to record it. So the last thing I do with outcomes is fill in a form first. I do all of this work and then get to the form. Okay, and that's the same with any kind of person-centred review process. We're doing the work and then we're going back to whatever format you need to use to fill that. Okay, any questions? Do I dare ask any questions?
Just an observation, Joe.